Hey all, Tapes here, back playing some more Planet Zoo, and we are back with a bear habitat, a grizzly bear habitat. So we made a start on this on the stream the other day, on Twitch stream. So just was kind of working out a concept for what I wanted to do. The idea of it is that it's going to be like an old kind of gold mine area that's been taken back over by the grizzly bears, and now the kind of the zoo is kind of using that as a habitat, something like that. Anyway, that's kind of the idea. Again, this is a little short sort of series. Not sure how many episodes they're going to be, where we're kind of trying to establish just kind of establish some creative ideas and get some juices going and see what we can do really. So yeah, did some basic terraforming of this. Obviously, it's got a long way to go. So let's pick up with the speed build. Okay, so yeah, I think this is about the third or fourth one of these we've done so far, just these little one-off habitats. Usually they're chosen by members of the Discord, suggested by members of the Discord. This week I actually kind of fancied doing this one myself, so it was my idea. So we've got, loads of little bits and pieces going on. This first little bit here is kind of supposed to be the idea of like a water flume kind of thing. You see these little sort of sluices run off the hills to bring water down, for them to do their kind of panhandling and things. So these are supposed to look like broken bits of timber. Obviously we don't have anything that does that exactly. Some little ideas of these kind of pans for sifting gold and things. Go to town on this idea a little bit. This habitat ends up being quite a lot larger than it needs to be, and you'll see in the cinematics at the end of the video that there's actually quite a large area. I end up putting more bears than you're supposed to into this. So yeah, here's me creating some little fake sand and some gold nuggets. I'll put some gold nuggets in here. So yeah, but I just thought it was kind of a fun one to do this week. Felt like it took me a while. There's obviously, as usual, there's lots and lots of footage cut out, and we jump around in the speed build, and obviously you get a bit of a kind of mix of things, because I didn't want you guys to have to sit through quite so much of me placing rocks. Obviously there's a lot of rocks going down, and a blend of foliage and stuff. So these animals are primarily Alaskan, kind of North American, indigenous, and they tend to be found in kind of temperate tundra taiga habitats or environments, is what the game recommends. The trees you get in this are obviously quite lots of pines, lots of cedars, lots of I think they're called deciduous trees. Is that the right word? I'm not sure. So we blend in the rocks here. This is actually I was really happy with the way this came out, and I think this probably improved my rock placement skills, which is kind of part of the idea of doing this, these kind of one-off habitat things, is that I get to kind of just do whatever I fancy, and we get to kind of practice and do the skill, do whatever kind of we like, really creatively. And obviously, if you're doing a proper zoo, a full zoo, you're kind of slightly stuck with the design decisions that you make, or the locale of that zoo, or the kind of the environment that you go with. Whereas this, I can kind of just completely abandon the realism and do completely abandon the realism of it being an actual zoo and go nuts with kind of whatever I want to do creatively. So they actually blend. I have to say, the rocks blend really well together, and I think mostly what I've done before when I've done rock work is used all of the same type of rock. So I've stuck with the temperate, or I've stuck with the tropical. And actually what seems to work really well, and you'll get a really nice kind of blended contrast, is if you have these mixes of the colours. So you'll see some of those darker tundra rocks in there with the temperate and the taiga. So this is their kind of one and only little bedding area, creating this little camp, just making sure that they can get up there. As I said, they can use this a lot larger kind of habitat than they require, but it felt like it kind of needed that for what I was doing. I wanted it to feel grand and epic. We've done a fairly small, I guess the Okapis was quite small, so this was back to a much bigger project. And as I said, I started this on the Twitch stream. I may well continue to do that. The Twitch stream's probably going to be once a week, and it just gives me a place where I can kind of explore ideas, and so a lot of these videos, I think, if it goes according to the plan, that'll be how these videos start, with a kind of something's already established. Maybe not, we'll see. Just putting some foliage in. I talked about this a bit on the stream the other day, but what you find with these sorts of woods is that they're not like oak forests, and what you'd see in Europe and the UK, for example. They're actually they produce quite a sort of monoculture around them, these sorts of trees. So that means you kind of don't get loads and loads of undergrowth, which actually works quite well, because for me that meant I didn't have to go heavy detail actually up on this plateau. I kind of just went for the areas that you can see. So it starts to jumps together quite a lot of this kind of detailing, getting these bits of realism, really, I guess, to kind of bring it to life. Just a few rocks. You can see my little Mr. Domez's archer there. Super useful to use that all the time, really, just to get scale and an idea of what things look like. So we're putting some foliage very kind of pointedly in the areas where the trees aren't. So the gaps between the trees is where I'm going kind of heavy with the foliage. There is a few little places where I do stuff like this just to give it some depth. And there's a lot of kind of blending things in with the rock work. So you just find it kind of gives things a bit more detail and a bit more realism to kind of think about where weeds and plants will have taken advantage of little collections of soil, for example. So you do often see these little bits where you get in rocks, you'll get little clumps of foliage, because the rainwater will have pushed the soil, and the soil will have collected in a particular area, and maybe that soil has carried seeds from other plants and things. So it's all kind of fairly logical, and it obviously helps you to break up the edges of the rock work and the terrain. Fairly sparingly use some flowers just to give it a bit of pretty, I guess, a bit of detail. And what are we on to next? So you'll have sort of seen this in that kind of little pre-intro bit, but what we did on stream was create this kind of mine shaft sort of thing. This is supposed to be the old mine. So I've just added a bit of detail into the track here. You'll see that there's a tipped over a mine cart, and then supposed to be this kind of little tunnel. We're now getting into the first bit of actual kind of guest area. So this was definitely this is always a bit of a weird thing, I think, is the combination of things that kind of serve the guests and serve the animals. So we do kind of two things here. We're doing a bit of path work, obviously struggling with the path at the moment as usual, but I wanted to create kind of this contrast between something that might be an old existing structure and the new concrete sort of hyper contrast building. So this is what we're doing here, but it feels like it ends up with quite a, I don't know, quite a sort of 70s vibe to it, maybe 80s vibe to it. The modern parts anyway, or the more modern parts. So just add in a few little viewpoints. I think I talked about this on stream as well, but one of the key bits, I don't entirely get it right, but one of the key bits I think to doing habitats is obviously you're considering the viewpoints for the people, so you're making sure that they've got unobstructed views. But actually what's very common in zoos is to make sure that people don't have a view of other people, so you can have more than one viewpoint, but try and kind of hide that viewpoint from each other. So if you understand what I mean. So not lots of places where you're looking straight at guests looking at animals, if that makes sense. So we try and do that a little bit. So we create this kind of little, this is almost like a little window viewing area, putting in a custom railing. We've got this kind of little break between, railing 1 and railing 2. This is quite a common thing you see, is to stop people from either dropping bits of rubbish or food or themselves over the barrier and into the animal's habitat. So far fairly sort of simple. And again, I went for something mostly in this building or in the guest parts of this, went for textures and I guess materials that were very much a contrast to the natural environment that you're looking at. So very clearly using concrete, very clearly using glass, and sort of strongly defined accent colours like black and that sort of thing. So it's got a sort of, I think it's got a kind of starkness to it, this guest area. Concrete and blockiness that I'm doing here. But sort of several different viewing points, several different points at which they can interact with the animals or view the animals, and nicely kind of broken by the river in the middle of the whole thing. So just detailing up. I don't really know why I did this, but this was just an idea. But to kind of break this whole thing off as a sort of habitat that you kind of walk into, and it's not like a flat entrance. Everything's raised up, which is a real contrast to what we did with the okapis. So we're creating like a boundary wall here, and effectively this becomes. I don't know if I've kind of been inspired by some of the polar bear habitats I've looked at recently, but I think that's sort of the same sort of vibe that you get from this when it's finished. Is it's got this kind of boundary wall that would separate it from the rest of the zoo, for example. So it's a real little kind of almost like a little world you walk into. A bit more concrete. Finally, we start to give the animals some things to play with. So, scattering these around, and you can see that I've jumped. As I'm jumping forward, you can see the depth of the detailing and all that sort of thing coming in. And so we've got little viewing areas there. You can see some of the little rubble bits that I've added, some of the temple rubble pieces, some more broken rocks. Really starting to come together now. I didn't want loads of keepers kind of interacting in the habitat, but you kind of forced to do that. As I said, I've said this before, but it would be really cool to have a way of having them interact in kind of a middle ground and not have to have them in the main area of the habitat, because I would quite like them to be able to kind of be tucked away somewhere. We don't have anything in this habitat, although it could quite easily be added, where there's like a night house or anything. They're basically being left pretty wild, the bears, which is not entirely realistic, obviously, but he didn't really have time or the piece count for doing so. But maybe that's an idea if you were to add this to your zoo. I didn't actually mention that, but all these blueprints for anything that I'm creating, this should be able to be up as both a park file and a habitat, because I think I've got it under the piece count, which I think is 4,000. Obviously you'll have the problem of trying to get the path in, so what I'm doing to kind of help that is putting the park file up as well as the habitat, so you can choose to kind of use either or compare where I've put the paths in. So I think we're getting we're getting to the fairly late stages now, just little bits and pieces just to give it a bit more realism, not going too nuts with the rock work on this kind of slope that I want them to be able to use, but doing some stuff that kind of makes it feel realistic. I was quite surprised to see that the keepers can actually still get up and down this it's actually quite a steep slope. There's our kind of main view, and then I did quite a lot of this actually, making sure that, one of the things that you have to kind of consider when you're putting blueprints up on the workshop is that if you put up just the habitat, obviously you lose all the pathing, and the pathing that I've got is usually quite kind of integrated into the habitat itself. So as you can see here, yeah, that barrier is right underneath and effectively forming a bridge with the pathway that's above it. So what I've done is I've effectively replaced all the floors. So when you drop your if you do pick up this habitat from the workshop and drop it in, you'll see you should be able to kind of at least see where the paths are supposed to be, because I've got all these wooden floors, etc., and the textured floor there. So yeah, just another railing. This one is a sort of dead-ended path, that the idea is that this would go off to something else, so maybe a wolf habitat behind it or something else that kind of fit to the biome we're in. So I think we're probably getting up to the last, about another 2 minutes of the speed build, guys. So now we're starting to work. This is kind of the last little bit that gets done, but we're working on what was supposed to. The idea of this is that this is supposed to be an original building. So this was potentially there when the old kind of gold rushy type thing was going on. So this is the contrast to the stark modern concrete thing. And I used a lot of this piece, which is actually the climbing pieces. I was surprised. I was a bit worried that it might kind of end up affecting my performance, but it didn't seem to be an issue. And it's actually a better texture than the what you get in the building pieces, the standard on-grid building pieces for logs, and is slightly smaller than the log piece you get. So actually you could end up building a whole structure out of these climbing pieces. I put in some points for our little archer / guests to look through. So some windows, just building some pretty basic custom windows in. And the guests do use both of these points. Actually quite pleased, because this is sometimes you have a bit of an issue in the game where if you create these dead end points, they don't necessarily come in here, but this ends up being a bit of a kind of education area for them, with a viewpoint off of a little deck and stuff, which I think you'll see in a minute. But I think we're coming pretty much to the end of this, guys. So enjoy the cinematics. Very much appreciate you watching, and I shall catch you guys next week. Take it easy.